Hey, what's up? This is Phoenix and welcome back to my channel. I encourage you to hit that like button, to subscribe, and to share with your friends. My goal for the year 2020 is to reach up to 200 subscribers, so let's make this year 2020 the best that it can be. I've got much more content to come, so stay up to date and let's get going. Today, I plan on talking about Socrates as part of my ongoing Philosopher series. You may have seen my other videos, and if not, check out my playlist for my Philosopher series, and you'll be able to watch my earlier videos. I will be adding to this series as frequently as I can, and I'm very excited to cover these very interesting and very dynamic philosophers. Now today, I'm going to talk about Socrates. Socrates is an enigma in the world of philosophy and in the world of literature, as well as the world in general. And Socrates has a lot of interesting traits and ideas attributed to him. To provide context, I will say that nobody really knows exactly who Socrates was. Socrates himself did not write any treatises or poems, and but yet people were aware of him. And we only know of him through three writers of ancient Greece: Aristophanes, Xenophon, as well as Plato. And it is fair to say that Socrates is best known through his depictions by Plato, or through the depictions by Plato, and that is how we know of Socrates the most. Certainly Plato's dialogues have been the most influential, and it has influenced probably more than any other thinker and writer how we think about Socrates today. Now, Socrates is different from the pre-Socratic philosophers, so you might have remembered my previous episodes on Heraclitus, Parmenides, and other pre-Socratic philosophers. And as you will remember, the pre-Socratic philosophers often focused on cosmology or science. They often focused on trying to explain the world and explain what the world was, by doing that through their abstract ideas or through their investigations into the world. But Socrates was an individual who went in a completely different direction and began the process of moral philosophy. Moral philosophy is obviously the system or study of morality, and basically moral questions are questions such as: what is the virtuous life? What kind of decisions and behaviors should we participate in? What kind of things should we do, and what kind of things should we say? As well as thinking a lot about social norms and what is appropriate in society to say, be, and do. Now, this definitely covers a lot. Bertrand Russell had a great distinction in his History of Philosophy when he described Socrates as being a moral philosopher, specifically the idea that he was asking questions about moral things and moral themes versus other potential fields of study that people could go into. So as I've said, the pre-Socratics focused on cosmology and science, while with Socrates and the lineage with Plato and even Aristotle, we get a lot more of moral philosophy and asking these questions of what should we say and be and do. And so moral philosophy is a very deep field of study, and it often goes into notions of human behavior and human virtue and obviously morality and the things that we should do. And this is what Socrates was asking in his own way. What are Socrates' ideas? This is a valid question. Aside from morality, what kind of questions is Socrates asking? Well, I'll start by giving a little bit of background in terms of how Plato associated Socrates. So, as an example, in the dialogues, Plato often portrays Socrates as asking a series of questions. And so one of the ideas that you get by way of Plato is this notion of the Socratic Method or Socratic ignorance. What is Socratic ignorance and this method that I speak of, you might be wondering? Well, that is a valid question, and a lot of that deals with this idea of asking questions as a kind of teacher or interlocutor or even just someone exploring ideas. And you ask a series of questions to try to come to a common understanding of knowledge, morality of the world. And this is a very interesting way of going about it. Often in law school, for instance, you will hear about the Socratic method because a teacher will ask questions to a law student, and the law student will try to figure out the truth through his own reasoning and through his own logic to be able to see what is true. And this is a good analogy for thinking about how asking questions can allow the interlocutor, such as Socrates, as well as the recipient of the questions, to come to knowledge that is much more universal and that is agreed upon. Though the process has to start by asking a lot of questions and by imagining certain scenarios and ideas that are very much possible. The Socratic method is very common in philosophical discourse throughout the ages, and this is because philosophers are often asking the question, what is true, what is good, what exists? And these are very valuable questions to ask. And the Socratic method tries to get to the core of things and to see what is true. And often this is attributed in the way that Plato writes Socrates' character and the way that Socrates is portrayed. Socrates was someone who wanted to get at the truth. Socrates was someone who wanted to know what the truth was and what was most valuable to think. And so that was why he asked his questions. The ignorance aspect of Socratic ignorance focuses on the idea that there are many things that you can't know. So while you might be able to come to some degree of understanding and be able to have some degree of truth, there are also many things that you won't know. And you have to acknowledge, as Socrates often stated, I know that I know nothing, which means that you acknowledge that you are ignorant of the facts, of the details of philosophy, and that there are many things that you don't know. Of course, you wouldn't want to take this idea too far because there are many things that you can certainly know, and so you don't want to be ignorant all the time, but the idea of being ignorant was really a matter of humility. It was a way of asking questions and learning about the world without assuming that you know everything. And this was very integral to how Socrates conducted himself and conducted his philosophy and philosophical investigations, and it's a very valuable way of going about these things to try to find out what is true, but also understand your own limitations with knowledge. Another statement that is often attributed to Socrates is know thyself, and this deals with the idea of do you know yourself, and can you know who you are? And this was often what Socrates was trying to figure out. There is the idea that the reason why Socrates asked so many questions was because he was trying to understand himself. He was trying to understand his own thought process and the various things that he was trying to learn about and discover. And so it's very much an active and engaging process of knowing yourself. And the reason why knowing thyself is so important is because self-reflection and introspection are very important for helping you not only know yourself and your own and the reasons for your own behaviors and decisions and thoughts, but it also helps you know about the world. If you have self-reflected very much on a variety of issues, including thinking about yourself in this kind of introspective way, then you are able to know about the world and therefore ground yourself into the world that much more. And it's a very deep way of going about the world in my perspective and from my perspective, and it gives you that extra richness and that extra perception and perspective that other people may not have if they don't consider themselves and who they are. So know thyself is a very important statement by Socrates, and it has influenced philosophy since the beginning. The other statement that is often attributed to Socrates is the unexamined life is not worth living, and this is a very important statement as well. If you don't examine your life and the things that you are searching for, the things that you are trying to accomplish, the things that you even want to think about, then in a way you're kind of living an empty life. Socrates was very much a character and person, an individual who really wanted to engage with life. This was why he was often asking people questions and trying to get to the nature of reality. He was doing this because he wanted to understand the world, he wanted to understand himself, and he wanted to understand his own meaning and his own life. And so this is a very beneficial way of going about things if you were trying to explore the world and explore yourself and examine your life and think about the various things that you are trying to accomplish in life. Socrates was definitely a very larger-than-life individual, as you can tell from these maxims that I have referenced. And a lot of it is because he really wanted to live a full life. He wanted to know what made him tick. He wanted to know what inspired him. And these are all very valuable things in my perspective. You might be wondering how Socrates has influenced me, and I would say easily one of the things that has influenced me the most about Socrates is thinking about the notion of what is worth doing and what questions should we ask, what questions are worth exploring, and even just the notion of asking questions at all. It seems that often in life and society we are discouraged from asking questions, and this is often because we are supposed to fit in a narrow mold and fit into a narrow ideology. But Socrates, as you will find out, Socrates did not live a very easy life, and he often asked difficult questions and therefore was very much at odds with the state. People wanted him to be specifically more held back, and that often limited Socrates, but that didn't stop him from asking questions. And so when I think about my own philosophical approach, when I think about my curiosity and the things that I am trying to accomplish, I definitely think about how I very much want to ask questions because I want to know. I'm a very curious person, and I probably have a degree of Socrates in me. I apply the Socratic Method, and I think all of that is really important. I will close by discussing Socrates as executed by the state, and this was something that happened because the state, as I said, did not agree with Socrates' approach, and they often accused him of, as an example, of corrupting the youth, even though he was just asking questions and trying to know what the truth is. And the state didn't like this because it went against the status quo, and because people did not like the questions that Socrates was asking, even though they were very fundamental to humanity and to the human condition. So Socrates drank hemlock after the state sentenced him to death, and even though it's a tragic kind of dramatic way of going out and of dying, there is a way in which Socrates was definitely a misunderstood figure. People did not understand what he was trying to do. They did not understand why he asked the questions that he asked, and it often made his life very difficult, particularly at the end when he had to drink the hemlock and he had to die. So, to close, I would say that even though Socrates his life ended in a tragic way, there's a way in which his legacy is still felt. You know, Plato is very influential, and Socrates influenced moral philosophy and philosophy in general, specifically in the West, and we think about these questions all of the time, even if we are not as aware of them or as in tune. I hope that you enjoyed this discussion, and there will be much more episodes to come in my Philosopher series, so definitely keep a lookout, and I hope that you enjoyed this talk. This is Phoenix, and keep a lookout. There will be much more to come from my Philosopher series, and thank you for watching. I will see you next time.